Morning guys, today is April the 29th. We have 9 more lessons until the exam and 22 more days left in school. That includes weekends. What you're doing now guys, go ahead and pull out your paper, pull out your pen, or open up a Microsoft Word document. What to expect today guys. So your objectives today are to explain how economic forces influence agricultural practices, describe how the von Thunen model is used to explain patterns of agricultural productions at various scales, and to explain the interdependence among regions of agricultural production and consumption. Your key points: agricultural productions regions are defined by the extent to which they reflect on subsistence or commercial practices. Intensive and extensive practices are determined in part by land costs. Large-scale commercial agriculture operations are replacing small family farms. Cultural commodity chains link production and consumption of agricultural products. Tech has increased economies of scale in the agricultural sector and the carrying capacity of the land. And von Thunen's model helps explain rural land use by emphasizing the importance of transportation costs associated with distance from the market. However, regions of specialty farming do not always come to von Thunen's concentric rings. And lastly, food and other agricultural products are part of the global supply chain. So farm locations, why are they there? We must consider physical, political, cultural, and economic factors when we consider why farms are located where they are. The physical conditions of an area are going to greatly impact where a farm can be located. If the physical environment is not conducive to farming, then there can be no planting of crops, unless new technologies are developed which help to artificially create hospitable environments. So let's take a look at some of the physical features that a farmer may consider. First one is soil. So factors in soil include depth, texture, nutrient composition, and acidity of the soil. Different crops may require different types of soil that contain different nutrients. Farmers can add nutrients to soils to help encourage the growth of their crop. So these are 4 different types of soils that you would find throughout the world, and different types of plants would respond to different types of soils. Stuff can't even grow in sand. I mean, you've been to Boca Chica Beach, you've seen that there are plants that do grow there. There aren't many though. Sand isn't really a hospitable, nutrient-dense soil. Loam and silt are a lot more nutrient dense. Clay is another one that's pretty dry. Next is relief. Relief isn't talking about like getting relief from somebody, but it's talking about the shape of a field, which can include its slope and altitude. Now, some plants actually tend to fare better on higher slopes. Some plants tend to fare better on flat ground. And we'll see what that is, well, why that is right now. So farmers tend to pick fields that are more flat, which are conducive to most crops. Flat fields are easier to shape for farming, as well as allow easier irrigation of the soil. Irrigation meaning getting it wet. So some crops like grapes tend to do better on sloped surfaces. Coffee is another plant that does much better on sloped surfaces. This can impact how much sun the crop gets, which can greatly impact the growth of a crop. Altitude is also important as it can determine the climate of the region. So for grapes and coffee, if it's on a slope, that means that some part of the day it's not getting direct sunlight, and the other part of the day it is getting direct sunlight. And elevation is another really important factor, because the higher the elevation, the less sunlight it's going to be getting at some points, which allows for a longer growth period, which results in a more flavorful or more juicy or more developed, a better developed crop. Next would be climate. This can be a crucial factor in determining which crops are planted, if any at all. Climate will determine how much rainfall an area will get, as well as the average temperature of an area. Different crops need different amounts of sun and rain. This is a map of the Köppen climate system. Next would be cultural factors. Cultural factors are another huge factor that dictates what people eat, what people grow. And remember, we're not only talking about plants and agriculture, we're talking about animals as well. So these can determine not only where certain agricultural activities take place, but whether or not they take place at all. So the culture of a people can dictate what types of agricultural practices take place. Also, if people move from one place to another, they may bring with them their agricultural practices, which we call relocation diffusion. Hindus do not allow for the killing of cattle. In fact, most cows roam free in Hindu countries. This is a picture of a cow in India. There will probably not be a meat production company or meat-based products of cows in Hindu countries. Again, talking about India as a main one. Muslims believe it is unholy to eat a pig or even touch pigs. They're considered spiritually unclean animals. There will not be any pig farms in Muslim nations. So, say Pakistan. Pakistan would definitely not allow for pig consumption in that country. Bacon will not be a dominant food eaten in Muslim countries either, seeing as how bacon comes from pork. I mean, maybe they'll eat turkey bacon, but bacon probably isn't such a hot item there. Next one would be political factors. Political decisions also play into where crops will be planted, or if they're planted at all. Governments will pay farmers subsidies to plant or not to plant certain crops. Subsidies is that's just money given to farmers by the government to perform a specific task. In the United States, farmers are paid a subsidy to grow corn. So the government pays farmers to specifically grow corn. So again, governments will pay farmers subsidies to plant or not to plant certain crops. This is to try to control the price of products so that farmers can continue to thrive in their nations. Farmers are very important for the survival of the human race, seeing as how we only have 5% of the world population being farmers, or 5% in more developed countries would be farmers. So if you were to grab 100 random people in the United States, 5 of those guys would be farmers. 5 of those guys are responsible for feeding the other 95 people in a 100-person pool. Governments will create friendly loan programs for farmers so they can purchase equipment, land, and fertilizer. They give farmers money to purchase more efficient seed types so that greater quantities of seeds can be grown at a lower cost. The idea is to grow more foods on less land. So this was a huge hit during the Green Revolution, where the Green Revolution brought in more seeds that had higher yields, seeds that were able to grow in harsher environments. The whole point is to be able to grow more food with less land. This way, land can be used in other ways, and people can still be supported. So some crops are considered national treasure. French wine grapes. The French government will not allow for the destruction of these prized grapes. Wine is a very big export from France. Champagne is another very large export from France. Champagne is actually only just sparkling wine. It is wine that has been carbonated, but if it does not come from Champagne, then it is not considered Champagne. Champagne is a city. Economic factors. Farmers may decide to switch to a new crop if there happens to be a sudden increase in the purchase of that crop. For example, coffee beans. With the increase in coffee production due to increased attention of U.S. coffee shops, coffee plantations are on the rise. Corn. With the introduction of government-subsidized ethanol programs, farmers may convert to the production of corn as it is increased in demand throughout the world for ethanol production. So ethanol production, again, is a type of it's basically fuel made from corn. It's also a type of alcohol. So you can do so much with corn. I don't know if you've ever looked at a nutrition facts label. You'll see that corn syrup or high fructose corn syrup are also major ingredients, because they're usually one of the first three ingredients on many food products in the United States. So you have corn in everything from your Skittles to your chips to your sodas to your fuel in your car. Corn is a very large crop. It's not the best for people, but it is a very versatile crop. So that's why the U.S. government does pay farmers many subsidies just so they can grow corn, because there are a lot of uses for corn. Land rent. So land rent refers to how much money a farmer must pay in order to rent the land he is working on or growing crops on. The cost of the land will influence a farmer to move his farm to where he can grow crops on a reasonably priced piece of land. So more than likely, the cheaper land will be found further away from the center of cities, which is where more extensive farms will be. Which brings us finally to von Thunen's model. So von Thunen's model was created by Johann Heinrich von Thunen, a 19th century German economist. So he's an economist, guys. Created this model. He created this model to predict and explain where and why different agricultural activities would take place around a city's marketplace. It predicts and explains agricultural land use patterns. So in order to create this model, von Thunen made several assumptions. One city has only one marketplace in which farmers can sell their products. They will try to sell their products for maximum profit. The farmland is equally available to be farmed and equally productive for each farmer. And there is only one form of transportation available. So in the model, there is only room for one variable, and that is distance of a farm from the market, as evident in transportation cost. And we will look at a von Thunen model picture right now, so we can go ahead and sum this all up in a picture form. So keeping all of the parameters in mind, parameters meaning that there's only one market, that the farmers are going to try to sell their food for maximum profit. Farmland is equally able to be farmed, and it's productive equally for each farmer. And the only one form of transportation, which is a horse-drawn cart. So again, keeping all of these parameters in mind, the model comes out looking like a giant bullseye. So we have circle, circle, circle. The central marketplace is surrounded by a series of rings. Remember, the central marketplace is found at the middle of the circle, which represent different areas of agricultural production. So each ring is a different agricultural production area. As we move outward from the marketplace, the types of agricultural production become more extensive as opposed to intensive. This model can be explained by discussing rent and transportation cost. A grain farmer needs much more land. So grain, think that they farm for wheat, for like bread or flour. So if this is the case, they are going to need a lot of land. Now this is called extensive agriculture. When you use tons and tons of land, that's called extensive agriculture. You're usually not going to have so many like fancy farming. You're not going to have so much fancy farming equipment on your land. You're not going to need as many people, but you are going to have a lot of land to manage, and usually it's going to be used for grains. So again, grain farmer needs much more land, and land that is close to the city center is expensive. So his farm will be further away from the central marketplace. So usually we will find grain farmers not on the extreme outermost region, but pretty far out there. A dairy farmer will be closer to the city because he does not need as much space to raise his crop. So not only this, but you also must keep in mind that the product may spoil if it is too far from the market. So you can already start seeing that this is becoming outdated because we do have dairy farms that are pretty far away from the city. That is because with the advent of refrigeration or even trailers, like faster transportation, we can afford to have dairy farms much further away. Your milk can stay fresh longer because it's refrigerated, and it can travel further distances because we're traveling much faster than a horse-drawn carriage. So also land use for grazing tends to be in the ring furthest from the city because much more land is needed for grazing and not much money is made from the land that is used for grazing. So the key here for if you're going to have herds that are going to graze, you're going to try to find the cheapest land, which is going to be the land absolutely furthest away from the city. That is because the cheaper the land, the further away from the city, the cheaper the land is going to be, and the farmers here aren't really getting too much money from the type of land that they're using because the type of land that they need is just wide open areas that can support grazing, meaning cows walking around and eating grass. So this is the picture that I was talking about. You have seen this picture before. So in von Thunen's model, there is only one variable, which is transportation costs. In the real world, there's obviously more than just transportation costs. Von Thunen also assumed that all soil quality was the same and would yield the same output of crops. So if we see here in the center, this red dot is the city. So dairy and market gardening would be very close to the city. Market gardening would be stuff like cherries or strawberries. That's going to be intensive agriculture. So you're going to use small plots of land, but you're going to be a lot closer to the city. So your food is typically going to be like, if you were to get 100 pounds of grain or 100 pounds of strawberries, the strawberries are going to be significantly more expensive than the grain. That is because the strawberries are produced closer to the city and the grains are produced further away from the city. So dairy and market gardening are done here because in the time when this was created, you needed to be relatively close to the city, otherwise your milk would spoil, otherwise your strawberries, your apples, your oranges, your bananas, all of these delicate produce products would spoil, they'd get damaged in transportation, so close to the city. Again, you're also using smaller plots of land. Now this would be intensive agriculture, small plots of land with lots of features like irrigation systems, fertilizers. You're going to be investing a lot more money in your small plot of land than the farmer who lives out here would be investing in their large plot of land. Next, we've got forests. So forests would be relatively close to the city because you do need to be far away from the city enough because you're using a lot more land than for strawberry farming. Because, you're in a forest. You need lots and lots of trees, so you can chop those trees down and take those trees from the forest to the city. So you want to be kind of close because it's going to be difficult to transport those logs, especially on a horse-drawn carriage. But you also want to be far out enough to where you're going to be able to afford enough land. Move a little bit further out, and we've got grains or other crops. So this is where you're going to find a lot of wheat, sorghum, teff, lots of different grain crops would be grown out here. You've got lots of land, and again, this is extensive agriculture. So we have intensive on this ring, extensive on this ring, right here, this one. And then lastly, we've got ranching. I already explained why ranching would be way out here on the outside. That is because they're going to use lots and lots of land, and that land is not going to be too expensive out here. This would be your exit ticket, guys. I know it's blurry, but it's really not so bad. You could definitely read what it says here. So I'm not going to put these questions on the exit ticket. So I shouldn't be getting any messages saying like, sir, where are the exit ticket questions? Because you're going to see a blank document. You're going to see a blank document when, again, like I've done this a handful of times already. Your exit ticket questions are here. Take a picture of those questions because you will not have them. You will not see them on the actual exit ticket. All you're going to see is A, B, C, and D, and you're just going to answer those there. Give it 5 seconds so you guys can take a picture. And then we'll go on to your homework. So today's homework, begin that exit ticket, turn in that exit ticket to me by midnight. Also, begin reading chapter 13 of your textbook. If you have already read it, then finish your readings off with chapter 14. Chapter 14, guys, is the last chapter that you guys are going to read. So take notes on chapter 13, take notes on chapter 14. Hopefully you guys are already done with chapter 12, otherwise you're a little bit behind. And then you'll be done with your reading. No more reading. Or at least for my class. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and send me a message. I will try to respond as quickly as possible.